I am going to open the hearing for HR13, opposing the permitting of a landfill next to Forest Lake State Park in Dalton, New Hampshire. And I leave it to Representative Sullivan to introduce this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I decided to put in this House resolution because I think there's been so much drama around siting of this specific landfill. And as everybody in this committee is well aware, there's been a lot of animosity, and there's been a lot of arguing, there's been a lot of controversy all surrounding landfill siting in this state. Our laws, I think, have been proven to be a little bit outdated, and that's something that we need time, as some of the other bills that we've addressed today are trying to address, but they're a little bit outdated, and we need time to come up with better regulations around the siting of landfills. But one thing I think is not controversial, at least it's not controversial to me, and I honestly don't think it's controversial to the majority of people I speak to. If you look at the representatives as co-sponsors, this is a very bipartisan co-sponsorship, is Forest Lake. The Forest Lake location is not a good location for a landfill. The soil there, right, is very porous. As I'm sure many of you have heard in other testimonies throughout the years, if you've served on this committee before or have been paying attention to the saga of this specific landfill for the past many years. It's just not a great location in terms of if things start leaking, it would go into Forest Lake or into the adjacent river system, which feeds into the Connecticut. I think it's a very reasonable stance. While this has, I acknowledge has no teeth. It's just our stance as a body if we were to pass this through the House. I think it sends a strong message that this is something that is not a good. It's not a good idea to have something next to a lake in New Hampshire's first state park that has a lake. And if we could pass this, I think that would help get us a little bit of news coverage for the rest of the state. A lot of times up north, where I'm from and where a few members on this committee are from, we sort of sometimes feel like we're ignored by people in the South, but the population is. And this bill has kind of risen above that, this issue has risen above that, this landfill at Forest Lake. I think this resolution would just elevate it that much further and bring this controversial issue to the mainstream even more than it already has been through the great advocacy of many of the people who've been opposing this for years. And it would hopefully help really solidify the position of the state that this is not a good place for this, and we need to hold off on putting a landfill in one of the more beautiful parts of our state that is potentially dangerous if there's leaking and because of all the hydrology of the soil in the area of that location, and give us some more time to find better locations and better regulations. So that's the motivation behind this, and I really hope that you guys will consider this, and hopefully we can in a few weeks' time be celebrating passage on the House.
Any questions from the committee? I do have a quick question, actually. Seeing as House resolutions kind of don't go anywhere, they don't go to the Senate. Well, the Senate never does anything with them. How do you feel that this is, meaningful to do?
Yeah. So, and I, as I said when I was presenting this, I think that I acknowledge that there's no teeth to a House resolution, but what it does is it shows this is the position of the House, and that should elevate this issue statewide, because that will get covered in the media. That'll show that the majority of the House, and that would be a bipartisan vote if we can pass this. The majority of people in the House, regardless of party, do not want this landfill, think this is an inappropriate site for a landfill. Is there teeth behind it? No, and I acknowledge that there isn't. But I think elevating this issue and showing that there's a bipartisan support, something that we can all unite behind, is a great message for the people of New Hampshire, because increasingly it's rare that we see bipartisan work, and when we do see it, our citizens celebrate that, they love that. And B, it would also just elevate this issue for the people who live in the southern part of the state, whether it's Portsmouth or Nashua or Manchester. A lot of these people don't actually understand some of the issues going on with respect to this bill, and so this would just get a little bit more news coverage. And You know, we all know a lot of people, a lot of our constituents are living in bubbles. They're not always paying attention to issues that are not in their backyards. And, you know, there's not a lot of people up in this part of the state. And so this is a good way for us to sort of magnify an issue that's really important to us and should be important to them.
Do you feel that the issue of citing a landfill in Dalton has not gotten enough press?
No, I think it's done. They've done a great job. The advocates for it have done a great job in elevating it. But I think that this would be a way to elevate it even more, because it would send a message that this is the official position of the House. If this were to pass, this would be the official position of the House, and I think that would be a statement in its own right. That would be newsworthy.
Okay, thank you, Representative Germana, and Representative Wheeler. If you need to sit, you may please go to your seat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Sullivan. Would you say that a House resolution, in addition to the statement that has been made by the governor, provides added weight? Does it mean more for a House resolution on this issue, do you think, to pass, given the statement that the governor's already made? And does that perhaps also send a message to the body on the other side of the wall if future action is required?
Yeah, I mean, I think if two of the three branches of government are are in agreement on this, then I mean that's a pretty powerful statement. And you know, the governor has been pretty clear on this, and if we are clear about it, then it's hard to imagine that the people on the other side of the wall are gonna buck that trend.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Wheeler.
I have a question for you, Madam Chair. Is a House resolution able to be put on the consent calendar?
I don't know. I would imagine it should. I will ask that question of our House clerk.
I believe it is, but that would be a question for the committee. I believe that a House resolution can be on the consent calendar, but given that the idea behind a House resolution is to make a point about something public, it might make sense not to put it on the consent calendar and just have and even if we all agree on it, have a brief speech at the well saying, this is a great idea, let's all support it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well,
Does a resolution need a simple majority in the House? Do we know that? I thought it needed more than a simple majority, in which case it couldn't go on consent. Is it simple?
I'm not sure for that either. But I do know, pardon me.
Do you mind if I leave? Unless there's a question for me, because I have to go to work.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. There's no questions for you. But I do know that there are a fair amount of House reps that will not support House resolutions because they don't feel that they are meaningful at all. So there's that. I'm just saying. I call Carolyn Choate to speak on HR13. Good afternoon. Thanks for hanging in there and put on, yeah, there you go.
I'm here to, I am Carolyn from Nashua. I'm here to put a human face on the issue. I'm a member of the Cancer Club. Anyone else here? A member of that club? Not once, but twice. And I am 67 now, and my first bout was at 45 with breast cancer and told I had 3 years to live. And then 20 years later, thyroid cancer. And I took a moral obligation way back when, as a 45-year-old with 2 very young children, that I would do whatever I could to prevent cancer in all its forms, to the best of my knowledge. And I was a TV reporter for 30 years at TV13 Nashua that I owned with my husband Gordon, and I spent many an hour up here in Concord. So I know all about the media, and we do care in southern New Hampshire about this lake, and we do care about, or I care about, all the different causes of cancer. My last bout with cancer was thyroid, and PFAS are a definite cause. I now spend my time between working full-time at Southern New Hampshire University and writing about epigenetic forms of diet and all the different ways that cancer is making its way into our lives. And just happens that my column this week is about PFAS and all the ways it is working its way into our lives. I would vouch to say that we're consuming it all in our water every day, because unless you're drinking reverse osmosis water, you are consuming PFAS every day. Everything you eat, everything you drink, everything you touch. And to think that there is yet this beautiful little piece of property, indeed the first state park, when I found out that someone was, I don't know if I want to say crazy enough or ambitious enough to take advantage of our live free or die sort of libertarianism, knowing that Casella does even mention on its website about its support and ideology for sustainability, I really had to shake my head, because I thought, at what price? So I drove up to Dalton, and I don't know how many Nashwins have done that, but I did, because I wanted to know firsthand, what are these people facing and why? And is anyone listening? I'm nobody, but I'm a New Hampshire resident. I'm someone who feels like it is my backyard, and I don't know how many of my neighbors took off or felt like they could take off work today to come up here. But by golly, I think I represent a lot of people who give a damn about this, and I hope someone is listening. So I was listening to your parliamentary procedure observations, and I hope that you will recall this conversation here, that I hope there, yes, is bipartisan belief in this cause. I'm so glad that Governor Ayotte is behind this cause. Please know that I think that I speak on behalf of a lot of people who don't want this landfill there. My husband helped me write a little ditty last night. For our lake's sake, dump the dump. I mean, it's just really a no-brainer, and I do seriously hope we don't let the financial proclivities of private industry get in the way of what this small community wants and needs, as it represents all of us. And I don't know what questions you might want to ask me, but I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you for your testimony this afternoon, and I appreciate your experience on this. I certainly do not think that you're a nobody. You are somebody who've come forward to talk to us and tell us your story, and we do really appreciate that you've taken the time and the energy to do that. Representative Potenza.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and ditto to what Representative Aaron was gonna say. You're not a nobody. You're actually a constituent. You're our boss. And your voice is just as strong as the other, 1.4 or 1.3999 million in New Hampshire. So, we're supposed to take direction from you, and I'm so glad that you came here. Sorry, it wasn't a question. Would you know that you're very important to us?
Well, like I like to say as a cancer survivor, flat but beautiful. Thank you, and I do hope you will, above all, truly pay attention. I'm sorry that the PFAF law did not go as far as I had hoped it would, but get yourselves a filtration system for your homes and our capital.
Thank you. I call Nancy Morrison.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
I call Nancy Morrison.
Well, hello again, and thank you for hearing my testimony today. I'm Nancy Morrison from Whitefield, New Hampshire, and I bring greetings to Chairwoman Judy Aaron and the esteemed members of this committee. I'm here today to ask you to vote yes on House Resolution 13 to keep a landfill from being built next to Forest Lake State Park, one of New Hampshire's 10 original parks. There are actually 93 state parks in total in New Hampshire, and they all deserve protection from projects that would threaten their natural resources and beauty, as well as endanger public health and harm our tourism industry, which drives New Hampshire's economy. However, only one of these 93 state parks is being threatened by the construction of a mega landfill with the potential to occupy, over time, up to 1,800 greenfield acres, including all its infrastructure. A mountain of trash, admittedly 50% from out of state, would be situated on porous sand and gravel next to the pristine gem Forest Lake, as well as the Ammonoosuc River watershed, and acres of wetlands and fragile ecosystems. I will not review with all of you what you have heard about degradation and dangers of landfills. You've heard enough of that today. But we are talking about the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the soil we grow our food in for generations to come. And Judy, my last sentence kind of has you in mind from what you said earlier. I know House Resolution 13 is a non-binding determination, but it would stand as a symbol and as a signal of what New Hampshire values and is committed to protecting for its citizens and the environment here. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration on this resolution. Good.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have written testimony to submit?
I do. I didn't know if it was important enough, but I have to.
Sure, we'd like to include that in our file. Call the last pink card, unless anybody else would like to speak. Mr. John Swan from Safe Forest Lake.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for hearing my testimony. My name is John Swan. I live in Dalton, New Hampshire. I do not live on Forest Lake. I live near it and use it. I do need to preface my testimony by stating that in order to not get sued a third time by Casella, I need you to understand that all of this is my opinion based on my research and experience. And part of that, it's kind of funny to have to add that to basically my public statements, but in April 2020, Casella filed suit against me for claiming 39 statements I made were defamatory. And then basically through the process with the judicial system, it was whittled down to 9. And then ultimately we wound up settling. They didn't want to go to court, signed a non-disclosure agreement. And then 2 weeks later, they didn't like the news story that came out in the Caledonian Record about the story. And they filed a second suit against me for basically saying I violated the non-disclosure agreement. And since then, the reporter that did call me, I told him no comment. He filed a deposition stating that he never did speak with me about the story. John Casella just didn't like the story. And then since then, they have amended their complaint against me to include 13 statements by them saying my assertions that the NCS landfill is contaminating the watershed of the Ammonoosuc River are false and defamatory. So I think the groundwater reports that they submit via Sanborn Head will help that in court. We will be in court in September, I believe. But it's cost me over approximately $200,000 in legal fees so far with all the lawsuits. But I do want to, I really can't, Nancy's a hard act to follow. I just want to mention that I did email you my testimony, and in that I included a 2-pager. It's a Forest Lake State Park GSL landfill info sheet. I hope you'll read it. I've gone through, I've spent hours reading all these documents, these applications, and this breaks down the impacts that this will have on the North Country. But I also want to share the fact that the one thing that has remained constant, they withdrew the first set of applications, resubmitted again. They had to whittle it down to right now they're calling it a 1-phase only, 70-acre, 18-year landfill. The one thing that's remained constant is they're seeking 600,000 cubic yards of annual capacity. Converted to tonnage at a 0.78 rate, which is typically used, it's about 456,000 tons a year. To put that in perspective, the current permit for the Stage 6 operating permit for the NCS landfill is 230,000 cubic yards, or approximately 180,000 tons a year. So in essence, Casella is seeking 2.5 times what they are currently taking in at the NCS landfill. So just please, that's in my testimony I sent you. It's very important because they say it's an 18-year landfill. However, they have admitted in discussions in Dalton with the select board there that the life of the facility is not over with until the capacity is exhausted. So if you take that 230,000 cubic yards that they're currently doing at Bethlehem, roll that into the 18 years times 600,000 cubic yards, it's approximately 46 years of permitted life for this facility. And that goes against the wishes or the intent of RSA 149M, which calls for only a 20-year permitting period. Gives them a lot of wiggle room because let's say they do use that 600,000 cubic yards based on what they're bringing into the Bethlehem facility, 60% of that would be from out of state. So just something to keep in mind. It's giving them a lot of wiggle room. And then, of course, as Nancy mentioned, they have 1,899 acres of land under contract. They have not closed on that land yet. So keep in mind, they can obviously walk away from the land deal if they don't get their permitting, which is what they're waiting for. So anyway, thank you for the long day of testimony. And I really hope you'll, it's a symbolic gesture, but this is the people's house. I mean, we've been coming to you for 6 years for help. So, please, it's a lot of lives, a lot of families that couldn't be here today, but their lives, their properties will be impacted by this facility. So we really don't want to lose that lake. It's a beautiful lake. It's clean. There's no PFAS there. There's no PFAS on the site property, and there's no PFAS in our wells. That's why I bring my water everywhere. I don't get ice cubes when I go to a diner. I don't know what's in the water. My well, no PFAS detection. So thank you.
I appreciate your testimony this afternoon. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anyone else wish to speak on this, HR 13? Okay, I have the blue sheet, and, let's just see here. I have, for the online testimony, we had 296 people in support. Thank you, sir. In support, six opposed, 1 neutral, and I have 3, 4, 8 people in support of HR 13 on the blue sign-up sheet. And with that, I'm going to close the hearing on HR 13. HR 13, which is a House resolution opposing the permitting of a landfill next to Forest Lake State Park in Dalton, New Hampshire. And so we heard that bill. House resolutions. Questions, comments about that? Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so, I think that, the idea of, making a statement opposing permitting landfill next to, Forest Lake State Park in Dalton is entirely consistent with, the legislative track record of this committee for the last several terms. And it is also consistent with, the corner office position on this, so far as it has been publicly stated. I think that I don't see a whole lot of controversy on this. We also need to keep in mind that House resolutions are really a statement of collective opinion as opposed to having any sort of legal weight. So I think that it's a good gesture. I don't think that, and I'm hoping that we can get it to pass with a fair number of votes in the House. And I think that typically assuming that we can pass this out of committee unanimously, which I would like to see, we typically put that sort of thing on the consent calendar. In this case, I think it would make sense to actually have a brief speech from the well about it, just to sort of let people know what it is that the House, let everyone in the House know what statement is being made.
Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm generally against resolutions just because they don't have teeth. It's a waste of paper, yada, yada, yada. But the Dalton landfill is one I think worth moving forward on, and I'll be voting for the resolution. Got John Swan right here. He's worked very hard on the Dalton landfill, water warriors that are up there that are urging the legislature to do something about this. And I think making a short statement, and I wouldn't support this if it was just the statement, but because we have so many pieces of legislation about landfills, I think that it's important to make the statement and then also pass the legislation with teeth to make sure that we have clean, safe environment in the state of New Hampshire.
Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to go on record echoing my 2 previous colleagues' sentiments. We've come a long way on this issue, and I think it's now time for the legislature to say, this is our position. We've done the work. Now we need to get it across the finish line in every way that we can. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Minor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Although the House resolution really does have no teeth, I think it's an important statement that we all agree on that this House resolution should go through. Thank you.
Representative Sofakaitis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would like to make a public statement about my appreciation for Mr. Swan for the work that he's done, because when we first started having the talk about Forest Lake many years ago, it was just a small group of people, but now we have come to the point where there are constituents up there and they're asking us to act. And by putting out something like this that we can pass, hopefully on the other side of the wall, we can get it through. And with the governor having made a public statement about it, I'm hopeful that this is the year. Thank you.
Representative Freeman and then Representative Scully.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not gonna make a statement because this is really a no-brainer to vote for this resolution, but I'm just curious on when we as a committee and a body feel that we should get a bill to make this, really solidify this and codify this into law. And I think that's what we should be working on after we pass this House resolution.
Representative Scully and then Potenza.
Thank you. I'm in support of the spirit of this. I think that from my perspective, when you create a House resolution, it should be something that is short and pithy and can be read from the well. And I think this is so long and unwieldy that you really can't do it. So if the intention was to actually speak to the body and have them agree with the sentiment, I would just suggest that this be drastically shortened to get to the point so that we could read it from the floor and then people could agree with it.
Representative Potenza. Good morning.
Morning. I'd like to just respond to Representative Freeman's statement. We have lots of bills in right now, and we are going to hear one this afternoon that will that would stop a landfill in its tracks being built in poor soil. So, but the other piece that is huge for this is us passing a moratorium, a pause. I hate the word moratorium. But a pause basically, so then we can work with the agency, get good legislature on the legislative pieces on the books and move forward from that. So I support this resolution. I understand where you're coming from. I kind of heard that at the end of the last hearing from Representative Scully. I don't believe that we're gonna read the whole resolution on the House floor. There's so much backstory. People have been fighting on this for, I think we're going into our 6th year. We need to do this for the people.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to just echo what Representative Scully also stated. But this doesn't just, there's more wording in this resolution than just the Dalton landfill. So if the idea was to, prevent the Dalton landfill next to Forest Lake State Park, that's one thing. But there's a lot of wording in this resolution that is outside of that scope. And I don't think with that, in good conscience, I could vote for the resolution as it stands.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to reiterate what Representative Scully said. I wonder if instead of reading the whole resolution, if there isn't a artful way to summarize it without having to rewrite the whole thing. Because it is very long. And I think we would lose people if we were to stand up there and read directly by rote from the page.
Representative Gruber.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support this resolution. I think the legislature needs to take a strong stand over the years of people looking at what's happening and the mission of this committee itself. Yes, I believe it is too long to read, but maybe that can be modified, but I strongly support it.
Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so on the first 3 pages of the resolution are essentially citing all of the existing or many of the existing positions that the state of New Hampshire has about a number of things having to do with environmental protection and safeguards for our natural environment. The crux of the resolution is basically just what is on page 4, which is one sentence, that the General Court resolves to protect the interests of the state and the citizens by asking the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, the Governor, the Attorney General, to take all appropriate legal actions against permitting a landfill next to Forest Lake State Park in Dalton. That is all we need to read from the, so if we read that from the well and we preface that by saying that the bulk of the resolution is just providing all of the background in state policy that supports it. I think that's a less than 1 minute speech at the well.
Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm glad to hear this. Seems that we've got consensus behind the resolution. If it could be shorter, I don't think that it takes anything away from the part that Representative Bixby just read if it were shortened. But I just wanted to say, in terms of what a resolution can do, a resolution that has no teeth, is that I think this committee has been particularly good in my time here at leading the House and demonstrating bipartisanship. And we have on all of these kind of landfill bills. And I think that's one of the great virtues of a House resolution. If we can pass this with significant bipartisan numbers, I think that adds to the strength of this statement as a statement to our constituents, that it is a case in times where we have a lot of partisan fissures in the state, that this is a real bipartisan resolution. So I think that is the value of a House resolution, even when it has no application in law.
Thank you. Okay, so here's where I am with this. So where I am with this is I certainly would not like to see a landfill permitted next to Forest Lake State Park. I think that's the wrong place for that kind of facility. My problem is the same as what Representative Wheeler had said, is that in general, I don't like to vote for these House resolutions because at the end of the day, I don't really feel that they do anything. I mean, it's okay, you might argue that it's a statement from the body, but there really is no, where it really matters is the policies that this committee adopts, as well as, you know, the other side of the wall, if they go along with it as well. But I understand that the governor's made a position on this, but as an executive in the executive branch, they can only follow what the law says, what statute says. It's not like she can say, well, there will never be a landfill in any particular place. I don't care where it is. What depends on that is what the rules are and what statutes dictates, and where DES follows the law and statute and rules, and then determines whether or not a place is an appropriate place for a landfill. So one of my problems with this is that the statement that the general court resolves to protect the interests of the state and its citizens by asking New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, the governor, and the attorney general to take all appropriate legal actions. That phrase, all appropriate legal actions, I don't know what that means other than following statute and following the law. I don't know that they can just dream up some other way around or a loophole or whatever, but I have a problem with that particular line, and I don't know, maybe somebody can help me out with that. As I said, I support the fact that I don't want to see a landfill there, but I'm just really hesitant with the wording in this House resolution. Representative Bixby.
So, if I understand you correctly, the phrase legal actions can be interpreted in a couple of different ways. One is, if you're taking legal action, it sounds like you're suing somebody.
Right.
The other is that an action could be legal, which means consistent with all of the laws. And having that ambiguous phrase in the core, the crux of the resolution is problematic. So maybe we can rephrase it to make it clear that what we are asking for is them to take all actions that are consistent with current law.
Okay.
And that's not the phrase that I would. I don't think that is the perfect phrase either. I don't think that that wordsmithing by committee is a good idea.
Right.
But the gist is that we want to make sure that we're not talking about suing, we're talking about making sure that asking them to take actions that are within the scope of their legal parameters.
But at the same time, if I may, I know other people have some comments, but at the same time, I think this doesn't just apply any of the laws, the policies that we've adopted, the rules that DES has adopted, is not just apply to Forest Lake. It applies to any place where it is inappropriate to permit a landfill. And I wanted to be clear about that. Representative Comtois, Representative Howard after.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is, are we not following current law based on the statement?
Representative Howard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we need to ponder the very real possibility that this resolution will not pass through the body of the House, and that given the current temperature of that very body, it could very well fail. And what kind of statement would that make? So I think that if we have any concerns or doubts, that we should really take a measure of that risk.
Representative King?
I just want to second what Representative Howard just said. I was going to wait until the very end, but yeah, I think that is a real possibility that we could get it on a consent calendar here and then shoot ourselves in the foot by not putting it on a consent calendar. And even if it does pass the House, if it passes by like 3 votes, that's like womp womp. It would have been better. It would have been better just to put it on a consent calendar, use it as a media blitz. Hey, we got on a consent calendar, pass the House in a bipartisan manner, but it could very easily not be a bipartisan deal when it goes to the full House floor, and that's going to be embarrassing, in my opinion.
Questions? Representative Haskins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This resolution, for me, as with all things, I will vote my conscience. If I voted the way I thought the House might go or the Senate might go, perhaps I would vote differently, but I don't consider that in my votes of conscience. This is about the landfill in Dalton. I think, as was said better than I can by both Reps Bixby and Germana, this is a statement of where we are as a legislative body. I think it's an important one, and I would like to see us pass it. The idea of it going on consent is an interesting one. If we feel that it won't be successful, perhaps consent is the best way to go. Thank you.
Representative Freeman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to thank you as well as Representative Comtois, because I was very ready to vote for this, but you brought up some very compelling points about this House resolution. And again, I think this is why the legislature needs to be very, we need to be very careful on when we put House resolutions in and how we put them in, because it's not meant to usurp any law that or rule we may put in. It's meant to make an announcement, and I'm not feeling comfortable with voting for this after the points that yourself and Vice Chair Comtois brought up. Not because I don't want this to happen, but because it is a concern. I mean, a House resolution, most people would not look at that as a House resolution. They would look at that as a law. So I think we need to be very careful on how we word these things and how we proceed forward with it. I appreciate the sentiment that all have expressed here about it, and I as well do not want to see anything happen with that landfill, but I just think we need to be a little, I can't talk, I have cold medicine in me, I'm so sorry. I think we just need to be a little more choosy about the words that we put in a resolution like this.
Representative King? And then Germana.
I'm not the sponsor of the bill, I'm only a co-sponsor, but I personally would be totally amenable to reducing the size and scope of the resolution in order to be amenable to everybody in here. Because I also agree that sometimes you might have a really good resolution and you put too much flim flam in there, and it just is like a poison pill. So I like the idea of everybody being on board with this resolution and being happy about it.
Representative Germano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to address the phrase in question here about take all appropriate legal actions, because I think that does raise questions. As I read that, what that means is to use all of the legal power, all of the powers at your disposal, right? So we're urging the governor, the attorney general, et cetera, to use all of the powers at their disposal. It's not an implication that they are not enforcing current law, but it is to, again, use all of the powers that they have at their disposal. And I don't know, in terms of wording, Representative Bixby was suggesting the idea, if we say something to the extent of take all appropriate actions consistent with existing statutes. I mean, that's different from legal actions, which could have the implication of lawsuits, et cetera. But I think that's the meaning of it, to take actions consistent with existing statute that are, again, at the disposal of these various agents.
Representative Wheeler.
Just to follow up on what Representative King said, I wonder, with the amendment to the legal action language that you just brought up, which I support, could we not just have this lines 1 through 6 on page 4 be the resolution with the changes of the legal actions language?
You're asking me?
I mean, I understand that there's a reason for some whereases. I'm sure many of the whereases would be approved by everybody here, but if there's a few whereases that are unacceptable, then, I have no problem getting rid of those personally. But I'm not gonna hijack this bill, so.
Representative Bixby.
Yeah, I am worried that we're about to launch into trying to write this by committee right here, because we're getting into sort of the details of wording, which is much more the task of a subcommittee. And I was wondering if Representative King would be willing to take on a drastic reduction of the size of this resolution in the solid waste subcommittee.
I'd be fine with that, yep.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. Appreciate that.